4:47 a.m., Terminal Island, Long Beach, California, February 11th, 2026. 31 federal agents in full tactical formation moved across the loading dock access road in complete silence. No sirens, no announcement. Their earpieces carried a single coordinating voice from a command center in Arlington, Virginia, counting in 10-second intervals. At 0, the battering ram reached the warehouse side entrance. The door came off in under 2 seconds. Inside, darkness, the smell of compressed cocaine, and silence. 1,400 miles east in Phoenix, Arizona, a second SWAT unit breached a fortified auto body shop on West McDowell Road at the same moment. The shop manager, asleep in his back office, woke to federal agents 3 feet from his face. In Tucson, 2 tactical teams moved simultaneously across open desert toward a pair of ranch compounds separated by 4 miles of scrubland. In Houston, 6 DEA vehicles converged on a converted warehouse near the port. In Chicago, a self-storage facility on the south side was surrounded before anyone inside could reach a phone. In Atlanta, an industrial district loading dock near Hapeville surrendered without a word exchange. 47 simultaneous tactical raids, 5 states, coordinated to the minute, to the second, by a single command center in Arlington, Virginia. This was Operation Black Mirror. By the time the Long Beach sun broke over Terminal Island at 7:14 a.m., it was over. 8.2 tons of cocaine pressed into cartel-marked bricks, 340 pounds of fentanyl, $47 million in cash, 92 firearms, including 14 military-grade rifles, 134 people in federal custody, among them 11 cartel lieutenants and the single individual who coordinated cocaine distribution across the entire North American Pacific coast for the Sinaloa Cartel. And at 4:47 a.m. Pacific, the exact second the Long Beach team breached, a custom-built encrypted communications network used exclusively by Sinaloa's Pacific logistics arm went completely dark. 340 handsets, 14 states, dozens of active cells, not a single transmission since. The network was called Phantom. The DEA spent 19 months finding a door through its walls, not by cracking the code, but by finding the one person who built it in the one moment when he could be turned. That person was Salvador Ortega, 28 years old, electrical engineer, Tijuana. Ortega graduated from the Polytechnic University of Baja California in 2020 with honors in electrical engineering. He came from an ordinary family, parents who ran a small appliance repair shop on Avenida Revolution. No criminal connections, no prior law enforcement contact. He was exactly what his paperwork said, a small business owner with a technical skill set and a clean record. By 2023, he'd established a workshop near the Otay Mesa border crossing that ostensibly specialized in custom device modification for commercial clients. In practice, it was the sole manufacturing point for Phantom, a proprietary encrypted handset engineered from scratch for a single buyer, the Sinaloa Cartel's Pacific logistics arm. Phantom wasn't a commercial product modified for criminal use. It was built from the ground up. Each handset used standard smartphone hardware as a chassis, with a custom chip stack replacing the original processor. The operating system was proprietary, unavailable anywhere publicly, built by Ortega and a contracted developer. The encryption protocol was designed by a cryptographer Ortega hired through an anonymous Telegram channel. That cryptographer's identity remains unknown to federal investigators. Pricing was steep. Each unit sold for $7,500. Monthly subscription, covering server infrastructure, encryption key rotation, and remote device management, ran $1,400. Only 340 units were ever manufactured. Everyone distributed exclusively to lieutenant-tier operatives or above within the Sinaloa Pacific structure. No exceptions, no resales, no third-party access. Entry was controlled at the point of manufacture. The security features defeated federal interception at every known attack vector. Messages self-destructed 30 seconds after being read. No cloud backup existed anywhere. A remote wipe kill switch triggered by biometric handshake would silently erase all device data if the handset was powered on by anyone other than its registered user, within 3 seconds of detection. The network architecture meant that even if federal agencies seized the server infrastructure entirely, no message history could be reconstructed. The servers held no plain text, no logs, nothing. No federal wiretap had ever penetrated Phantom, not once. Between October 2023 and late 2025, that network facilitated the largest sustained cocaine transit operation in Pacific Corridor history, according to later DEA calculations. Product moved through 14 states along a transit chain, running from Tijuana staging areas through Southern California warehouse facilities, desert crossing routes in Arizona, a freighter relay system off the California coast, and inland distribution hubs in Phoenix, Houston, Chicago, and Atlanta. Estimated volume, hundreds of metric tons. Federal law enforcement knew the network existed. They could see its outputs. Seizures representing a fraction of what was moving, arrest records showing operatives who left no electronic trail, cells that communicated with no one outside their tier. But Phantom itself was invisible. No intercept tool in federal inventory had found it. No informant in the network's outer layers had described it accurately. Phantom's design specification was simple. Keep agencies blind. For most of 2024, it worked. The investigation didn't begin with a breakthrough. It began with a number that didn't add up. In April 2024, DEA Special Agent Marcus Delgado, based in the San Diego field office, completed a post-mortem analysis of a failed interdiction off the California coast. Agents had taken down a speedboat carrying 40 kilos of cocaine. Standard seizure, low-level couriers, none were carrying phones. What troubled Delgado was the pattern. Over the prior 18 months, his team had made 47 arrests involving individuals connected to Sinaloa's Pacific logistics structure. Of those 47 arrests, only 3 were carrying cell phones. The other 44 had nothing, 0.35%. In organized narcotics interdiction, even careful trafficking networks typically show 5 to 20% clean arrest rates. Burner phones, encrypted consumer apps, modified commercial devices, every known cartel operation leaves some trail. But Sinaloa's Pacific arm was running at 0.35%. That number couldn't exist in a naturally disciplined criminal operation, no matter how carefully managed. Something was replacing standard communications at every tier. Something federal agencies hadn't seen before. Delgado submitted a formal request in May 2024 to activate electronic intelligence analysis. The DEA Cyber Investigations Division authorized a dedicated team of 6 analysts within 3 weeks. What those analysts found over 4 months was, technically, almost nothing. No consumer messaging applications, no burner phones linked to the network, no email trails, no operational social media activity. The operatives existed digitally in the civilian world, paying utility bills, using food delivery apps, maintaining ordinary-looking online profiles. But their operational communications were invisible. The silence was too complete to be human discipline alone. Someone or something was producing it at a systems level. One detail surfaced during cross-referencing of border crossing records against known Sinaloa Pacific movements. A small electronics workshop near Otay Mesa in Tijuana had received visits from 12 individuals over a 14-month window, documented through surveillance footage from a joint operation with Mexican law enforcement. 11 had confirmed connections to known Sinaloa Pacific associates. The 12th was the workshop's registered owner, Salvador Ortega. No one had yet connected the workshop to Phantom. At that point, no one in federal law enforcement knew Phantom existed as a named system. Delgado's team began building a file on Ortega in September 2024. The profile that took shape over 60 days was specific enough to take upstairs. On paper, Ortega remained unremarkable. Clean criminal record, current business license, tax filings in order, bank accounts consistent with modest commercial income, but his U.S. travel pattern didn't fit. Between January and September 2024, Ortega made 6 trips across the border on his B1/B2 visitor visa. 3 to San Diego, 2 to Los Angeles, 1 to Phoenix. Each lasted between 48 and 72 hours. He stayed in mid-range chain hotels, paid cash for incidentals, ate at unremarkable restaurants, made no significant purchases on traceable accounts. Cell tower records for his registered personal phone showed something else entirely. The phone connected normally during travel and hotel check-ins, but it went dark. No tower ping, no location data, during windows ranging from 2 to 6 hours each visit, consistently, in afternoon and early evening hours. Either powered down or placed in a Faraday pouch. Those blackout windows corresponded exactly with the hours Ortega was, per credit card records, supposedly eating or resting. He was meeting people, and whatever device he used left no record anywhere. A FinCEN financial analysis completed in January 2025 identified a secondary channel the visible banking had concealed. A holding company registered in New Mexico under a different individual's name, receiving irregular wire transfers from a Cayman Islands corporate account. Total transferred over 22 months, $2.3 million. The amounts varied. The intervals varied. The pattern matched payment for ongoing services, not product, delivered across an extended period. Services, maintenance, something Ortega was providing continuously. The cyber investigations team formalized their working hypothesis by December 2024. Ortega was manufacturing a bespoke encrypted communication system for cartel use and providing ongoing technical support, replacement units, and system maintenance. Authorization for expanded surveillance was granted January 6, 2025. I spent time going through the surveillance logs from the 3 months that followed. One detail kept nagging me. Not what agents found inside the workshop, but what they couldn't find. Physical surveillance teams rotated through the Otay area on irregular schedules to prevent pattern recognition. They documented a consistent rhythm, component shipments arriving in unlabeled boxes from Shenzhen and Taiwan, Ortega working alone or with one part-time assistant, finished units leaving in padded shipping cases addressed to various commercial addresses in Baja California. No visible cartel contact, no obvious handoff, nothing that, in isolation, constituted probable cause. Ortega was careful in ways that suggested he'd thought about this for a long time. In March 2025, a shipment arrived from a legitimate Shenzhen supplier. 800 Bluetooth coprocessor chips. Commercially available, verifiable supplier. But the order quantity was 8 times what Ortega's documented operations would require across a full year. Someone was scaling production. The next generation of Phantom was being built. The investigation had a clear picture of what Ortega was doing. It had no way inside. That was a structural problem with no clean solution. 340 handsets were already in circulation. Arresting Ortega on circumstantial financial charges wouldn't collapse the network. The units in the field would keep operating. The cartel would locate a replacement manufacturer within weeks. The network would go dark 60 to 90 days in return. 19 months of investigation in federal law enforcement would be no closer to the operatives using it. DEA needed not an arrest, a door. 3 months of expanded surveillance had produced no observable vulnerability, no legal exposure, no visible debt, no leverage point. The Quantico Cyber Division flagged the case as high priority but operationally stalled in April 2025. Then, in May 2025, Salvador Ortega's younger sister was admitted to Scripps Mercy Hospital in San Diego. Her name was Elena, 24 years old. She'd crossed legally on a student visa 2 years earlier and was enrolled in business courses at San Diego City College, living with a roommate in Barrio Logan. No criminal record, no cartel connections, no awareness of what her brother actually did. The diagnosis was stage 3 ovarian cancer. Treatment protocol, surgery, followed by a minimum of 6 months of chemotherapy. Surgery at a U.S. facility would cost $220,000. Elena had no U.S. health insurance. Ortega's accessible liquid capital, based on documented accounts, didn't cover it. The most recent holding company transfer had been delayed 3 weeks. A DEA handler assigned to the Ortega surveillance file flagged the medical situation to headquarters within days of it appearing in insurance records obtained through a court order. The internal memo was brief. Subject has a pressure point. Recommend contact plan. Using a target's family medical crisis as an approach vector isn't neutral, even without explicit coercion. DEA approached Ortega with an offer, not a demand. Cooperation in exchange for legal protection and assistance, accessing Elena's care through federal health channels. He wasn't coerced. He was presented with a calculation. Cooperate or watch your sister's hospital debt consume what you have. The distinction matters. Agents didn't manufacture the crisis. They exploited an existing vulnerability. That boundary sits in the case file unresolved. It doesn't necessarily make the operation wrong. It makes it complicated in ways the public record didn't describe. Ortega agreed to cooperate in June 2025. Elena underwent surgery at Scripps in July. She wasn't told what the arrangement involved. What Ortega agreed to do wasn't testimony, wasn't recording conversations. It was hardware sabotage at a level never attempted against a criminal communications network of this architecture. The DEA cyber proposal, developed with technical specialists from NSA's Tailored Access Operations Division, was precise and narrow. Ortega would continue manufacturing phantom handsets exactly as before. No change to visible architecture. No change to encryption layer, operating system, self-destruct mechanism, or user experience. The cartel's technical vetters, who inspected every batch before distribution, would find nothing wrong. Nothing would change on any surface they could reach. What would change was invisible. The Bluetooth coprocessor in each new and replacement handset, drawn from the 800-unit Shenzhen batch, would be modified by Ortega at the chip level before installation. A secondary firmware layer embedded in the coprocessor's reserved memory space would execute one function. Whenever the handset connected to any cell tower, it would mirror a copy of every keystroke typed on the device to a covert signal collector running on a frequency Phantom's monitoring layer didn't scan. The keystroke copy happened before encryption, before the 30-second self-destruct timer began. DEA received plaintext content of every message composed on a modified handset in a window of approximately 19 to 23 seconds after typing, while the original still existed on the sending device. 30 seconds later, the original was gone. The modification was undetectable because it operated in hardware memory space below the software layer vetters inspected. The device looked identical to an unmodified unit. Encryption performed identically. The kill switch functioned identically. The only difference was a process executing in reserved chip memory that Phantom's operating system had never been written to check. Ortega began shipping modified handsets in July 2025. Replacement units first, cycling into the field through natural replacement as devices were damaged, lost, or flagged for support. Within 60 days, approximately 40 of the 340 active units had been replaced. The first intercept reached DEA's collection node on August 3, 2025, at 11:42 p.m. Pacific, a logistics coordination between a lieutenant-tier operative in Phoenix and a distribution contact in Dallas. A stash house address on East Ledbetter Drive, date, time, quantity, contact name. DEA had full plaintext before the message finished its 30-second countdown, before it ceased to exist for the people who sent it. The message was gone from Phantom. The text was in Arlington. The intercept operation that followed mapped an entire cartel logistics network city by city, name by name. What agents found was significantly larger than anyone had estimated. Over 7 months, as modified handsets entered the network through natural replacement, intercept volume grew proportionally. By October 2025, 68 units had been replaced. By December, 94. By January 2026, 112 of the 340 active handsets, roughly one-third of Phantom, were transmitting plaintext to DEA. 73,000 messages, 7 months, 14 states. The picture that emerged wasn't what analysts had projected. It was significantly larger. DEA had estimated the Pacific logistics arm operated across 9 or 10 states. Message traffic showed 14, including Massachusetts and Nevada, 2 states where the agency had no prior intelligence of Sinaloa Pacific activity. The intercepts named every cell leader, 17 of them, active across the continental United States. Drop schedules for major transit hubs, updated on weekly rotation, stash house addresses in 21 cities, the complete Pacific transit chain, from Tijuana staging areas, through California desert crossings, through coastal freighter relay, into inland distribution hubs, mapped with granularity federal analysts had never achieved against Sinaloa Pacific structure. What's most surprising isn't the technical execution. It's what the intercepts revealed about network discipline. Message traffic showed routine counter-surveillance protocols, scheduled key rotation calls, address rotation cycles that moved stash locations every 3 to 5 weeks. The network had operated at this professional level for years, invisible because its communications left no trace federal agencies could follow. And buried in a message chain from late November 2025, a name, Tijuana, the individual who coordinated the entire North America logistics structure, a 44-year-old Mexican national who'd never appeared in any DEA database, who communicated outside Phantom with no one connected to cartel operations, whose identity had been entirely unknown. He was in Houston. By February 2026, the case file had grown to more than 9,000 pages. 17 confirmed cell leaders, 11 lieutenants with sufficient intercept evidence to support prosecution under the Continuing Criminal Enterprise Statute. The logistics coordinator, now identified, located, and under physical surveillance. The complete transit chain mapped with confidence ratings above 70% for each major node. The question wasn't whether to move. It was timing. The structural problem, only 112 of the 340 handsets carried the modification. If raids targeted confirmed nodes while 2/3 remained unmodified, cartel operatives would detect silence from colleagues within hours. An absence from 11 simultaneous lieutenants would read as catastrophic compromise. Every unmodified unit would go dark, and the cartel would rebuild under a new system within days. The only viable approach, simultaneous entry at every confirmed location, executed inside a window of 11 minutes, 30 seconds, every team in position, every warrant active, every breach at the same moment. 3 days before the operation was scheduled, an additional complication surfaced. Intelligence from a contact in Tijuana indicated that at least one Phantom user had reported an anomaly to cartel technical personnel. A brief, non-standard signal pulse during a cell tower connection. The source couldn't confirm whether the report had reached anyone with technical capacity to investigate. If it had, if cartel engineers identified the coprocessor modification before the operation executed, 19 months of surveillance and 73,000 intercepted messages could become worthless before a single warrant was served. The options were binary. Delay until Tijuana intelligence could be assessed, risking full exposure of the hardware compromise, or accelerate the timeline by 48 hours and execute on available information, accepting that some node coverage was incomplete. The decision came from the special agent in charge of Pacific operations, in consultation with the Department of Justice's Organized Crime and Gang section at 11:58 p.m. on February 9, 2026. Accelerate. 47 tactical teams on standby. 9,000 pages of evidence. A network invisible to federal law enforcement for years. A 48-hour window that might close permanently. The decision wasn't comfortable. It was the only available one. What no one knew was whether someone on the other side had already been told they were coming. 12 hours later, every team was staging. February 11th, 2026. 0400 hours, Pacific. 47 entry teams. 263 agents and officers. DEA tactical units, FBI tactical support, and local SWAT operating under Federal Task Force authority. 4 DEA helicopters on standby over Los Angeles and Phoenix. Command center in Arlington monitoring live body camera feeds from 17 team leaders, every feed labeled by location code, every timestamp synchronized to the second. At 3:50 a.m., the coordinator confirmed all 47 teams were in position. The final coordination check ran through every earpiece. 47 individual call-outs, 47 confirmations, then 60 seconds of silence. At 4:47 a.m., one word, execute, Long Beach, Terminal Island. The warehouse at 1418 Pier B Street had been under physical surveillance for 6 consecutive days. Thermal imaging the night before confirmed at least 8 individuals inside, 4 stationary near center. The entry team of 12 agents came through the loading dock side entrance and roof access hatch simultaneously. The 3 men at the folding table had no time to react. On the warehouse floor, 112 cartel-marked bricks of compressed cocaine, stacked 4 high on pallets, each wrapped in industrial vacuum plastic embossed with a batch identification mark. 8.2 tons of the total seizure passed through California locations alone. In Phoenix, the fortified auto body shop on West McDowell Road had operated legitimate commercial services for approximately 2 years as cover. Oil changes, brake work, paying customers. Behind the primary hydraulic lift, a false floor panel ran the full length. Inside, 31 cocaine bricks, 44 pounds of fentanyl in vacuum-sealed parcels, a wall-mounted firearm rack holding 27 weapons, including 6 military-grade rifles with high-capacity magazines loaded. The shop manager, a 39-year-old cartel lieutenant whose name appeared 62 times in the intercepted message traffic, was asleep in his back office. He didn't resist. His phantom handset sat face up on his desk, showing no signal. The network had gone dark 14 seconds before the door came off its hinges. In Tucson, the 2 desert ranch compounds required the most complex planning in the entire operation. Separated by 4 miles of open scrubland, connected only by a private dirt road monitored via DEA drone for 3 weeks, any alert from one could allow evidence destruction or armed resistance. 2 separate SWAT teams with helicopter air support moved simultaneously from opposite approaches. The first compound, 4 acres, 3 structures, 8 vehicles, including 2 armored pickups, surrendered in under 4 minutes. Every individual complied on first contact. The second required a 22-minute perimeter hold before 4 individuals inside the main structure complied. Combined seizure, 820 pounds of fentanyl in pressed tablets, $960,000 in banded cash, 11 firearms, 3 sets of encrypted USB drives linked in subsequent forensic analysis to cartel financial records. In Houston, the converted warehouse near the Port of Houston had legitimate commercial tenants on 2 of 3 floors. The cartel-controlled space occupied the 3rd floor and an adjacent loading bay. Entry required coordination with building management, evacuation of adjacent commercial spaces to prevent civilian exposure, simultaneous breach from 4 access points on 2 floors, 6 minutes from first entry to full control. Inside, $12 million in vacuum-sealed mixed currency, 36 cocaine bricks, handwritten ledgers documenting 3 years of Pacific logistics payments, names, dates, dollar amounts, transit routes. A physical record of everything Phantom Intercepts had confirmed and significantly more, including a financial relationship with a vessel operator working commercial freighter routes between Manzanillo and the Port of Los Angeles that Intercepts had implied but never conclusively mapped. The North America Logistics Coordinator was found 3 blocks from the Houston warehouse, asleep in a rented bungalow in the Museum District. No weapons, no resistance. He'd been living approximately 2 years under an assumed identity using documentation linked to the same Tijuana network that manufactured phantom handsets. At arrest, he asked only one question: how? In Dallas, a stash house in Oak Cliff yielded $300,000 and 40 pounds of cocaine. In Chicago, a self-storage facility on the south side contained 500 kilos of compressed cocaine, 200 rounds of mixed ammunition, 4 handguns. In Atlanta, the Hapeville Industrial District loading operation surrendered without incident. 22 arrests, $900,000 in cash, 60 kilos of cocaine. By 6:12 a.m. Eastern, all 47 locations had reported successful entry and control. 134 arrests, 11 confirmed cartel lieutenants, the logistics coordinator, 83 lower-tier operatives. Every phantom handset present at arrest already showed no signal. The network had gone silent before the first breach was complete. One detail stuck with me going through post-operation reports. The first phantom intercept DEA received, the August 3, 2025 message about the Dallas stash house on East Ledbetter Drive, described a location agents found empty on February 11, vacated approximately 3 weeks before, based on forensic evidence. The network had moved the address on its routine 3-week rotation cycle. DEA knew. They chose not to move on it early because doing so would have compromised the intercept operation. Product transited through that address during the gap. It's in the public record. Legal proceedings move quickly by federal standards. By March 2026, all 134 defendants had been arraigned in their respective federal districts. 61 entered plea negotiations within the first 3 weeks. The 11 lieutenants faced continuing criminal enterprise charges, carrying mandatory minimums of 20 years. The logistics coordinator waived extradition proceedings, was transferred to federal custody in Houston within 48 hours, and is held without bail pending trial currently scheduled for late 2026. What the investigation didn't recover: approximately $14 million in cash distributed across accounts and locations not covered by intercept program. 3 suspects identified by name and message traffic weren't physically present at any rated location on February 11th. One of them, identified throughout intercepted traffic only by a network handle, never a real name, hasn't been located. The identity behind that handle remains unknown. The open threads matter. Operation Black Mirror dismantled a specific transit logistics structure. It didn't address the supply chain above it. The transit network is gone. The production and export capacity that fed it wasn't the subject of this investigation. Here's what this case tells us about cartel operational security in 2026. The most technically sophisticated encrypted communication system a criminal organization can build can't withstand a hardware-level compromise introduced at the point of manufacture. Phantom defeated every standard federal interception tool in active inventory. What defeated it was one 28-year-old engineer under financial pressure and a federal team patient enough to build a 19-month case before contact. The cartel's security model assumed the manufacturer was untouchable. That assumption was the only vulnerability that mattered. Will a replacement network emerge for Sinaloa Pacific? Almost certainly yes. Salvador Ortega is in the witness security program under a new identity. Elena Ortega completed her chemotherapy protocol in February 2026 and was, at last report, in confirmed remission. Ortega's Tijuana workshop was seized and shuttered on February 12th. The 800 Bluetooth coprocessors intended for the next-generation Phantom system remain in federal evidence storage in San Diego. Subscribe. The next investigation in this series covers a separate encrypted network, a different cartel structure, a different federal exploit. It's already in production. The Phantom network went silent at 4:47 a.m. Pacific on February 11th, 2026. 340 handsets, 14 states, 73,000 intercepted messages, 8.2 tons of cocaine seized in one morning. 3 suspects not found. $14 million unaccounted for. A supply chain above the dismantled tier that remains intact. The network is gone. The demand that built it exists unchanged. The money to rebuild exists. The people who know how to build it, most of them, are not in federal custody. Phantom went silent. The next system has probably already been named.